Good afternoon, legal AFers. Good afternoon, Midas Mighty. Good afternoon, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo. Trial has wrapped up in week 4. Week 4 is over. Trump trial day 15, perhaps not the fireworks of day 14 with the cross-examination of Stormy Daniels, but in many ways, today may have been even more important with all of the custodial witnesses coming in and showing Donald Trump's social media posts and showing the text message. This, of course, before we all expect Michael Cohen will be testifying next week. Karen, you called exactly what was going to be going down today. Let's just take a look at our scorecard here where we keep track of what's going down each and every day in the Trump criminal trial. If you're out there watching, I suggest you take screenshots of these, and this way you can go back and check out what was happening from day 1, day 2, day 5, day 10, day 15, and you could remember, oh yeah, this witness testified, oh that witness happened, that witness testified, what happened here, what happened there. Well, let's just go down what happened today on day 15. You had more testimony from Madeleine Westerhout. She was Donald Trump's former executive assistant, and she worked in the White House. And I think one of the key pieces of information that she testified to is how Donald Trump would use Keith Schiller, his personal bodyguard, to bypass White House protocols and to have things sent to Schiller when he didn't want them to go to the White House, like hush money checks, perhaps. Then you had Daniel Dixon testify. Who is Daniel Dixon? An AT&T custodian of records. I bet you that Daniel Dixon thought when he was working at AT&T that he'd never be testifying in a Trump hush money trial, but because Donald Trump did not agree to authenticate records or agree that records were authenticated, you had to have custodial witnesses like Daniel Dixon show up from AT&T. And Daniel Dixon said, okay, well, here are true and accurate phone logs and phone records. And you saw phone calls between Cohen and Trump and Cohen and other people. And actually, one of the strangest things, and Karen, I'll get your take on in a little bit, Donald Trump's lawyer, Emil Bove, cross-examined Daniel Dixon and was like, but wasn't it possible that these calls between Cohen and Trump could be butt dials? Have you heard the term pocket dials? So we don't know if these were real calls or pocket dials, do we? I just thought that was just, again, one of those moments that's like, are you really you're almost attacking the jury's intelligence with stuff like that? But that's just my perspective. Then you had Jenny Tomlin testify, a Verizon custodian of records. Same thing with the AT&T custodian. Jenny Tomlin authenticated records from Alan Weisselberg and others. Donald Trump did get a small win from Justice Merchan, who excluded certain evidence that the district attorney's office wanted to bring in. It was Donald Trump in an interview with Larry King from 16 years before the underlying incidents in this case, where Donald Trump said that he was an expert at campaign finance laws and he knows everything about expert campaign finance laws. And Judge Merchan said, look, this is 16 years before the events at issue in this case. And so I think it's too attenuated. So the judge, applying the law and order, excluded these records. Then we had, what else did we have? The DA's paralegal, Georgia Longstreet, was recalled as a witness, a custodial witness. Here she showed a lot of Donald Trump's social media posts praising Michael Cohen, posts attacking Michael Cohen for flipping, post describing Cohen as getting reimbursements. I'll show you those in just a moment. Then we had another DA paralegal, Jaden Jarmel Schneider, a custodian, custodian of records, testified as well to authenticate calls and messages between Cohen and Trump, Weisselberg, Keith Davidson, all the other witnesses who we've seen testify thus far. And then at the end of today's proceedings, at the request of Trump's lawyers, Justice Merchan requested that the DA tell Michael Cohen, who's expected to testify next week, not to speak about Donald Trump, although Cohen has not, to the best of my knowledge, spoken about Donald Trump since he stated he was not going to be speaking about Donald Trump. I mean, Cohen's been speaking about other topics. I know that on our show, Political Beatdown, we very specifically do not talk about anything regarding Trump. We talk about things that are going on in the House of Representatives. But Karen, I just want to, before tossing it over to you, I just want to show some of these documents that the jury got to see today. Like these posts from Donald Trump on Twitter from May 3rd of 2018. This is a post that Donald Trump made. Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign from which he entered into through reimbursement, a private contract between two parties known as a non-disclosure agreement or NDA. These agreements are very common among celebrities and people of wealth. In this case, it is in full force and effect and will be used in arbitration for damages against Ms. Clifford Daniels. The agreement was used to stop the false and extortionate accusations made by her about an affair. Despite already having signed a detailed letter admitting that there was no affair prior to its violation by Ms. Clifford and her attorney, this was a private agreement. Money from the campaign or campaign contributions played no role in this transaction. Here is another post where Donald Trump praised Paul Manafort for not flipping on him, unlike Michael Cohen, and the jury got to see this. I feel very badly for Paul Manafort and his wonderful family. Justice took a 12-year-old tax case, among other things, applied tremendous pressure on him, and unlike Michael Cohen, he refused to make up stories in order to get a deal. Such respect for a brave man. And you see that stated August of 2018. Well, this was April of 2018. Another post from Donald Trump. The New York Times and a third-rate reporter named Maggie Haberman, known as a Crooked H flunky, who I don't speak to and have nothing to do with, are going out of their way to destroy Michael Cohen and his relationship with me in the hope that he will flip. They use non-existent sources and a drunk, drugged-up loser who hates Michael, a fine person with a wonderful family. Michael is a businessman for his own account lawyer who I have always liked and respected. Most people will flip if the government lets them out of trouble, even if it means lying or making up stories. Sorry, I don't see Michael doing that, despite the horrible witch hunt and the dishonest media. And then just here's a photo of Donald Trump with Maggie Haberman, just showing that, of course, the jury didn't see this one, but I just want to show you this one, showing that, of course, they know each other. Then there were numerous other text messages as well that were introduced. Sorry for that very long intro, Karen. I just wanted to show everybody all of the evidence, the text messages, before turning it over to you for your analysis. But of course, we want to hear from you. KFA.
No, look, I'm sorry. I'm in an unusually loud public place. Again, looking for a place to talk about the trial that broke early today rather than going until 4:30. It broke at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the prosecution announced they have two witnesses left, Michael Cohen and one other person. We don't know who it is. We don't know if it's another one of these records custodian type people or if it's someone they just want to end with so that they don't end with Michael Cohen, that's not the last thing that the jury hears. There's a lot of talk today about at the end of court after they dismissed the jury, and I'm just going to start with this, about Alan Weisselberg. This is going to be very interesting because what the prosecution was trying to do is put into evidence the separation agreement that Alan Weisselberg signed with the Trump organization that talks about non-disparagement clause, and meaning that he can't say anything bad about them. I'm not sure that would apply to a subpoena. But, the prosecution is like, look, he's a co-conspirator. He is all over this trial. He's been mentioned a million times. He's the one whose handwriting is on that document that spells out the crime, essentially the $130,000, and how they're going to add more money for this PR company and gross up the wages so that Michael Cohen can claim it as income, even though it's not income, make him whole, etc. And so there was a whole big conversation about that, and the prosecution wants to put the separation agreement in to explain why he would not testify favorably for the prosecution. And the defense, of course, is like, no, 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 that shouldn't come in. They could call him if they wanted, but he's in jail. We can't call him because he's in jail. Nobody can call him because he's in jail. And I'm like, well, by the way, when I was a prosecutor, my favorite thing was when some of my witnesses were incarcerated, because then I knew where to find them. Half the time you had people that would disappear on you or you couldn't find them. So it's very easy to produce someone from jail to testify in court. But for whatever reason, that seems to have befuddled the defense in this case. So essentially, the judge. So then they were like, the prosecution's like, well, I guess we could call him. And then the defense is like, no, you can't call him. He's not on your witness list. We didn't get a witness list. That, there's a whole technical thing. Like, yeah, you can't call him now. It would be an unfair surprise. So the judge said, well, we could call him. We could bring him in, and we could put him on the stand and see if he would take the fifth, see if he would speak favorably. We could do it outside the presence of the jury and see what he says. So I have a feeling this weekend there's going to be a lot of people scrambling to figure out whether or not Alan Weisselberg can testify. Would he testify? If he did, what would he say? I wouldn't even be surprised if either the prosecution or the defense went to Rikers Island, where he's currently serving 5 months jail for perjury, in order to see what he would say about some of the things that are at issue here. He was given immunity federally, and it was only supposed to cover any federal prosecution, but there is a supremacy clause. So I would argue that as a result of the supremacy clause, it would impact the state prosecution, and he would potentially be immune here too. And therefore, the reason that's a good thing is then he can't take the fifth and say that he refuses to testify. So we'll see. We will see what happens, but stay tuned. I think we're going to hear a lot more about whether or not Weisselberg has to testify, can testify, will testify, and if not, what the DA's office can say to explain one way or another. But this is a kind of a big deal. He's a big person in this case. Less so is Mr. Schiller, the body man of Mr. Trump from back then, his bodyguard. He's another person that I kind of been scratching my head saying, where is he? Is anyone calling him as a witness? Don't forget the guy who was standing outside the door when Stormy Daniels went into Trump's hotel room in Vegas. He was also the go-between between Stormy Daniels and Trump, and accepted the calls or made the calls. That's how she would reach him, by calling him, or he would call her. So the jury, I think, would be wondering where's Mr. Schiller. So those are a couple of the highlights from today. And then back to what you were saying, the Madeline Westerhout, who continued her testimony today. Remember, Ben, she was the woman who sat outside the White House, and she was kind of a low-level staffer. She wasn't like Hope Hicks or anything. But it's clear that she's trying to get back into the graces of Donald Trump and his orbit, because she cried on the stand. And, she's the one who was disgraced because she went out and had an informal dinner with reporters and, got to talking informally, which she shouldn't have, and said things like Trump doesn't like being in photographs with one of his daughters because he says she's overweight, which obviously is not kind. And so I think that she's desperately trying to get back into his graces. And I think that was fairly obvious from some of the things she testified to, like, oh, he loves his wife and there's a wonderful family and, all that kind of stuff. But, she testified about a date about helping arrange a meeting between Michael Cohen and Donald Trump. And she testified also that, in February of 2017, I think it was February 5th, maybe 2017. And that's a critical date, because I think that's when Michael Cohen I anticipate will testify. That's when he met with Trump to to talk about this. And it's a direct link to Donald Trump. It corroborates Cohen. And so, I think that that's going to be that was really an important point to bring out. But she also talked about how he had a PO box that he used to bypass the White House, and he would use that sometimes. Of course, Bill Clinton didn't have one, Obama didn't have one. This is a Donald Trump thing. All these little details are going to show what he was doing to try to do this personal scheme, criminal scheme while in office. So on balance, she was a great witness for the prosecution, and I think really provided some critical testimony. But you could tell from the cross-examination what parts of her testimony that the defense thought hurt their defense, because one of the things she also testified to was that they would receive stacks of invoices and checks, and those invoices and checks would go to Donald Trump, who would go through them and look at them and sign them, and and then they'd send them back. And these were his personal checks, by the way. And so that was part of her testimony. And clearly, because like I said, that the defense must have thought that really hurt their defense, because on cross, they were like, well, didn't he multitask? And sometimes he didn't look at all the invoices carefully. And would he sometimes just sign checks without looking at them? I mean, so clearly they didn't like some of the testimony that came out, that he was a micromanager, paid attention to detail, that he cared about every dime that went out the door, and definitely knew every dime that went out the door, that he was very frugal, all that kind of stuff. So they that must have really been something that they thought hurt their case. So they tried to neutralize that with cross-examination of her. And so, and then there's a lot of these, witnesses that they had to call, because Donald Trump's team refuses to stipulate to any of these witnesses who are putting in things like phone records and text messages and all that kind of stuff. So, fine, no problem. The prosecution's proving their case, and that's what they continue to do today. But I thought it was a good day for the people, as they say, meaning things went exactly how they would have wanted them to do. But I have my eye on the Weisselberg thing. That's a big deal, especially because he could be called to the stand and say some. If you're the prosecutor, you want to, if you don't want a missing witness charge, which is a charge to the jury that you should have called him, and if not, you can have a negative inference. At the same time, you don't want to call someone who is going to lie for Donald Trump, right? That kind of hurts your case, and you're not allowed to really cross-examine your own witness. So it's a complicated little dance and decision that's going to be made, I think, as everybody scrambles over the weekend and gets ready for Cohen's testimony next week.
Karen, can you explain to me the Weisselberg thing just one more time? Just because, I would assume both the district attorney's office and Trump's lawyers would know that Alan Weisselberg would be an important witness. I mean, we know that his notes are on key documents that talk about grossing up the amounts. He's potentially a missing link of, Trump ordering that something take place. I think all of the other circumstantial evidence and Trump's statements and Trump's knowledge of reimbursement and Trump getting the check sent to him and Trump saying, I look at every check that I sign. All of that's there, but there's probably a conversation between Trump and Weisselberg that is this missing link. So why is this becoming an issue? Why all of a sudden today is this an issue, when clearly we all know that he's in Rikers? We know that he pled guilty again to another perjury. In my view, there shouldn't have been some surprise. What happened today that everyone's like, okay, well, Weisselberg, and this is an issue on Friday in week 4?
So, okay, if you remember, Weisselberg testified in the case where the DA's office convicted the Trump organization of 17 counts of tax fraud, right? That was, I think, November of 2022, I believe. And And so they're familiar with Weisselberg. They've talked to Weisselberg. They know what he'll say, what he won't say. I think what they feel is, and the reason it came up today, is the prosecution, it knows that the jury is going to be wondering, where's Alan Weisselberg, right? Where, and so they've been thinking all along the way they want to explain it to the jury is by introducing his separation agreement with the Trump organization, that happened since his, I don't remember the date of it, if it was before or after his testimony in the 2022 case, but his separation, I think it was after, if I remember correctly. And he even got like a big bonus. And they want to introduce that because it's kind of telling, right? He testified in that case. He refused to give up Donald Trump. And what does Donald Trump? He rewards him by giving him a separation agreement with, I think it was $1 million or whatever it is, and threw him a birthday party and all that kind of stuff. They want to introduce that into evidence so they can argue to the jury, look, he's not going to be, we didn't call him because he's not someone who's going to testify favorably. He's someone who's going, he's obviously beholden to Donald Trump, and there was a non-disparagement clause in his separation agreement, which means you're not allowed to say negative things about me. Now, what I don't know is normally, I know with NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, I know that in a criminal case and you're subpoenaed, that an NDA does not get trumped by a subpoena, but a non-disparagement is somewhat different. I don't know how that works. So, so that's what they want to bring out. And so that's what the prosecution asked today, was to put that into evidence. And so that started a big argument about it. And where's Alan Weisselberg and why aren't you calling him? And that's why it came up today. So I have a feeling that the prosecution thought they could just put it right into evidence when it was objected to. And then the judge said, well, let's get Alan Weisselberg here and let's hear what he has to say and whether he would testify and what it would be. I think that's what put everyone into this, into this kind of thing where that's what they're going to be dealing with.
Got it. Now, I agree with Justice Merchan here. I mean, I don't know what the defense's perspective is, but I've never heard of a non-disparagement agreement or an NDA superseding any lawful obligations to testify. In fact, when I used to write those agreements, it was always our understanding that if you were compelled by a judge to testify, non-disparagement, any non-disparagements, you couldn't tell the truth at a trial or by court order would be an unlawful provision. And so, this would be an area where I would respectfully disagree with the prosecution if their view was to argue that an NDA is why Weisselberg can't testify, because I don't think that's an accurate statement of the law. And I just want to show people too that I think
it's non-disparagement. I think it's non-disparagement versus non-disclosure. I don't know if there's a difference, but I just want to clarify.
Yeah, at least in my, back when I was practicing, to me, it didn't matter, if it was a non-disclosure or a non-disparagement. If a court ordered somebody to testify and show up, you couldn't in a contract bind somebody over like a lawful court order or a subpoena. Usually what we would say in the agreements that we would write is you have to then give the other side notice so that they could object to it. And then they would go in front of the judge. The burden would then shift in this situation to Trump to argue, look, judge, we have a non-disparagement, so we don't think that it's fair. And then ultimately the judge would make the call. But if the judge's call is, no, you got to speak the truth here because we're in a criminal trial or a case, that would vitiate a non-disparagement or a non-disclosure or any type of confidentiality, obligation. And there would be ways to handle that in the discovery process. Those documents would be marked confidential or those documents would be put under seal. But then in a public trial, subject to a court order, I'm intrigued to see if Weisselberg testifies. I don't think that it's absolutely necessary, Karen, because I think that There's so much there. His handwritten notes are admitted. His text messages are admitted. But I could see a juror saying, where was Weisselberg? And having that question. And I wouldn't want on close Donald Trump's lawyers to say, where was Weisselberg? You notice who they didn't call? They didn't call Weisselberg. And then the prosecution's got a great answer. Weisselberg's in jail for committing crimes for that guy right there. That's where he is. But I could still imagine that still being just a potential, it could be.
Look, beyond a reasonable doubt is no joke. I mean, it's a really high burden of proof. So it is something that they have to grapple with, without a doubt.
Absolutely. Let's see if we can. I want to see if the scorecard, if we put it on there, that looks better for everybody watching, right? Can everybody see that scorecard? I was seeing in the comments a lot of people saying that it looked blurry before, but let me take a look at the comments right now on our YouTube to make sure everybody's able to get their screenshot of the Trump trial day 15 scorecard. Everybody out there, are you able to see this better? I just want to make sure. Okay, I'm seeing everybody saying better. Fantastic. We'll leave it up for a few more seconds for everybody to take your snapshots of it. I know everybody's been collecting these from Trump trial day 1, so I just want to make sure everybody gets it. Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, thank you so much for your ongoing coverage, your leadership here on Legal AF and on the Trump criminal trial coverage has been incredible. We're so lucky that you are giving this analysis here and helping the Midas Touch Network be the #1 destination on all digital media for coverage of the Trump criminal trial. And this past week, we were #1 on YouTube across all categories, all genres on YouTube. More people were watching the Midas Touch Network than Apple during a product launch, Vogue during the Met Gala, and NBA during the playoffs. And that's thanks to all of the Midas Mighty out there watching. None of this is possible without you. But what that means, the most important aspect is not, number one. The most important aspect is we're getting the facts out. We're getting the data out. We're getting the truth out. We're getting the evidence out. Now, once you have the data, the facts, the truth, and the evidence, please feel free to form your own opinions. I encourage you, form your own opinions, but let's just establish what the undisputed facts are, and then we'll go from there. KFA, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, thank you so much. Thank you all so much, Midas Mighty. Keep checking in for more breaking news here on the Midas Touch feed. We got another video dropping in about a half hour. And then throughout the weekend, we're going to have a ton of breaking news. So keep checking the Midas Touch YouTube site throughout the weekend. And of course, on Saturday, there will be a live Legal AF with Michael Popak and myself, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Legal AF will be here live Saturday, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Thank you all so much for watching. Shout out to the Legal AFers and shout out to the Midas Mighty.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the Midas Touch newsletter at MidasTouch.com/newsletter.